you. I don't know, maybe some people consider that punishment, but well, I can do that. You sit in front of you to show. You know, our minister has been just getting these going. On behalf of the Kensington Heritage Society, like all of you here today, we've got some interesting things, comments that we're going to be hearing about as the day goes on. Nielsen and Scott Wolter is going to give you a joint presentation. I know that when I sent out the press release, I said, you know, the Dr. Nielsen was going to talk about the language, and Scott Wolter will be talking about theology. But of course, they changed that. And that's okay. I think what we should do is these began to get started, and we may be interjecting some comments as time goes on, but we'll just let you say, get over and you would introduce yourself. But before you do, I think it's really important that we understand that these two gentlemen are well qualified. Dick has been studying the Runestone and the language of it for half of my lifetime. For thereabouts. About 20 years. Okay. Well, yeah, we're funny. Yeah, no, but I was like, Mr. Wolter is well qualified theologist. He's been studying Runestone for, well, not quite half my lifetime. 5 years? Okay, all right. But I think his work, along the language work, is kind of showing us some big grandpa whole character's own. So with that, yeah, so we all stand up and introduce themselves, please. My name is Scott Wolter, and I'm talking about, and just come on up here. Big Nielsen, all these people, I just want to say that it wasn't for me getting involved in this. I had a lot more free time on my hands, and I would have a much better voice than I have today. So, anyway, let's start by having Ohman stand up, and we start with the Colbert family here. We have Tom. Tom, stand up, acknowledge the crowd. And Tom is a great grandson of Ola. He is the son of Lowry, who was the son of Ida Colbert. Ohman, right? Okay. And I've known Tom now for about a couple months. He's quite therapeutic. I like this guy. His brother Bruce wants to stand up. Bruce, I'm sorry, I need to reset up with that. And I wanted to Joanne, stand up, and she's 3 years now, and she's Colbert. And Joanne is a little key figure here, and you're going to figure that out as we go along here. And I didn't see her until a month or two ago either, but I'm really glad I got to know you guys. So, welcome here, and I'm hoping you'll enjoy the show. And then we want to introduce a few other people here. We have Brian Ohman over here, who is a great-grandson of Darwin, and Karen, right? And Ohman, your brother's sister, right? And then your daughter's name is I don't mess it up. Hey, stand up. Hey, wait a minute. There you go. Okay. Jimmy Ohman is also here. him here a little bit, but I met him about 4 or 5 months ago now, whatever it is, 6 months ago, and I think, I know he won't say it, but I don't think it's bigger because we talk an awful lot, but we've had some really amazing times here in the last few months, and I think we're doing the thing. Before we get started, we're going to do a joint presentation, and this will be the first time we've ever done this. It's a brand new presentation, Dick and I, and I'll be starting before we go on. I want Dick to say a few words, because if somebody has something that they feel compelled that they want to say, go ahead and say it. And, you know, the wisdom and the team cast that's going on here, we're definitely going to call on you, so get ready. We need to call on you guys, so just be prepared. But anyway, I want to turn it over to Dick now. And then we'll get going.
Well, you heard my name is Richard Nielsen. The name Nielsen is on my game transfer for all of the universities in the United States. Around the same time as Ohman, and we also homestead in the country. On my father's side in Iowa, and on my mother's side in Montana. My two sisters and I still have that homestead in Dagmar, Montana, Sutherland County, which is over the Runestone line, dry wheat farm. My roots in Minnesota go to the fact that my grandfather and grandmother came to Iowa, Minnesota, where he worked on the threshing machine for the first couple of years. He traveled from Texas to Canada, as it is those days. He came later than on my father's side. He came in here about 1900. Took the homestead up in Sutherland County in 1904. He was trained there. He packed his lumber for his house on a sled and hauled it on foot, dragging it 40 miles. I've heard a lot of similar stories. I always called my mother the prairie days, and he told me that she stood in the fire with the animals all summer long because the mosquitoes were so ferocious in those days. And I'm sure that those are the conditions that the pioneers had here too. As I was growing up in California, I once asked my mother, would you use the name? And she said, Richard, Denmark, like little country. And that's why you so on sports. And I didn't know I had to do with my mother. Because of all the things that happened to me after I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy in 55, I went to see ice races all through the Army, including Greenland and many areas of interest. We liked it. I was sent after graduating from the University of Michigan, where the Coast Guard sent me for a degree in engineering. Of all things, I was sent to Copenhagen, Denmark, to get a doctorate degree in engineering. I was a second generation Dane. I was the first of the American immigrant family member who returned for that degree in Denmark. Very rare degree. It was only actually, at that time, I was the 33rd to get that degree. And of course, that's when I learned English, when I was already about 26, 27 years old. And I got very interested in that. Years later, I became a control engineer after I left the Coast Guard. I lived in Europe for like a year. About 5 years in England and 6 years in Scandinavia, Copenhagen. And I got very interested in my wife, of course, was interested in the pain and the church, which I didn't like. So I followed with my son in the graveyard outside the church, where we had Runestone. We got I got into the Runestone, and I started studying them when I was in Scandinavia for years. When I came back to the country in 85, I decided that if I didn't continue reading Scandinavia, I would lose the language. I moved to Europe, Spain, where I was fluent in Spanish, so I had to kept that up. So that's how I got started on the Kensington Runestone. I was very old in the book when I was 10 years old in 4th grade, and I always remember the story, so I think I'll study this. And that's how I got started. What surprised me was within 10 days of starting my study. I said, well, what are they talking about here? They're saying that there's this sponge can in the case of Runestone that looks like a lollipop, that only the farmers didn't know how to make it. The Scandinavian tin. So he took the zero from the tin and put it on the top of the stack to make a tin. And what are they saying here? That is error tin. I'm not a mathematician as well as an engineer. And I know that it's the numbers. So the only thing I had to establish then was this can known in Scandinavia, the Earth can in 1362. Well, it so happened I was working professional at that time in San Francisco, and they were sending me to Norway 10 times a year. I was leaving the next week, actually for 2 months. First 10 days in Norway, I looked in the library and found that the Arab numbers were known in Scandinavia already in 1290, particularly in Norway in the early part of the 1300s, and that was the Arab 10. So I said to myself, well, don't do that great job. That started a long journey. That was in 85 that I first started. So I had an advantage. I was flying back and forth 3 times a year to Scandinavia and did a lot of my early research there. I was also lucky to be living in the Bay Area and the best library in the whole world for Scandinavia and Berkeley, University of California. It was a very good university at one time, so they had a lot of all the collections of the various linguists and neurologists in Scandinavia. I could get anything I wanted. I discovered a lot of things there. There were many other discoveries that came along. The next one was the day room. The day room was supposed to be absolute proof of poetry. And there it stood, just where, in the most famous law of Scandinavia, the Stone Code of law that was written around the 1300s, 1319, and it was full of the day room. Yes, it didn't exist. It was invented by Ohman. Long time ago.
Well, in case you haven't figured out, today is, we're going to talk about our whole Ohman. That's the subject matter today. We're not going to get into the authenticity of the stone or anything like that. We want to try to talk to you today that is easy to present a compelling case to prove one way or the other that it's involved in carving the Runestone. Could we turn off the lights? Let's start with that. Okay, so you can everybody see me off? Okay, good night. Well, let's follow up with the Runestone. We're just going to presume that everybody knows what it says. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the stone, but I am going to just touch briefly on one of what I think is the most important pieces of it, certainly for me, that tells me that this old Ohman guy was not involved. And I should just start by telling you shortly how I got involved. I run a materials forensic laboratory called American Petrographic Services in St. Paul, Minnesota. I've had that business for our 15th year. I've been doing autopsies on concrete rock for almost 20 years. This is the 20th year. There are a lot of people that do this kind of work, so I'm a little different. I'll admit okay now. But in July of 2000, I was approached by the land patent of the Kensington, the Runestone Museum in Alexandria, and basically asked me if I could do a physical analysis to try to tell them something about the age of the inscription. And the first thing I said was, wow, Kensington, what are you talking about? I didn't know anything about it. I've never heard about it. And anyway, so I sat down and began to speak. I did everything. He said, well, I can appreciate this. And he gave me a little background, and he found it very interesting and all that. But I need to tell you something. That I'll do this analysis to you. But you need to be prepared that I might give you bad news. You're still going to pay me. And you're okay with that. Let's go. He said, okay, let's go. So we did. And we started the analysis. And I'm not going to go into the details of it because there's actually a lot of details. In general, the stone is a very complex rock geologically. It's a metagrade rock. It's not a gray rock. That means it's been cooked and heated over millions of years, and that actually works to our advantage. Well, what I'm going to do is start by talking about the geologic work that we did in 5 panels, and it led to the conclusion that this description is very old. Next slide. One of the things I thought was important that had never been documented before, and it's not to my knowledge, and nobody that I've ever met, is these white undulating and branching lineations that go over the back of the stone. Now, you saw the documents that were drawn by sketches drawn by various people. We'll come back and talk about those sketches in a little while. But they were consistent when they matched the apparent pattern of these groups. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but we believe that the location is consistent with the witness of the accounts of the stone being found in candles in the roots of the tree. In other words, Ohman said this is where he found it. Here's the evidence that corroborates that. The retooling, this is a term I made out. Basically, what's happened here is the original inscription, which is this level you see here in the wall of this room, has been recut. Somebody took something and they cut almost the entire inscription. We do the whole thing, but they did down here all the way. In Nielsen investigation in 1910, and we're going to talk a little bit about it in a second. You see Galloway. He came out here to Kensington 3 times. He noticed it, and he interviewed Olaf, and Olaf said, hey, I took the nail and I cleaned out the inscription and we found it clean it. Well, that evidence is still present on the stone, and I believe has led to bias and confusion on the part of investigators. They did the same thing I did when I first looked at the stone, and I saw these fresh-looking cuts. I thought it was very old. Well, when you get down in there and you look carefully, there's a lot of evidence on the wall. But I say, this is something that happened really by accident. One of the things we documented in this group in the area are these pits that have iron oxide or rust all along the perimeter of this thing. And to me, based on the core sample we took and the mineralogy of the stone, it's highly full of gold that has oxidized and completely weathered away. And that's nice. But that can happen relatively quickly. What helped us was that a few years ago, many of you will recall, when the Runestone was found. Well, fortunately for us, the people came forward and told us exactly the day, month, and year that they carved that face in the inscription, which it turned out to be. Well, that was the best thing in the world that ever happened to me, because now I had a control sample that I could use. I knew we needed that inscription. And one of the things we noticed were these little brown Runestone in the sea. And what those are these rock halos from the pirates, also in this rock. Because we took the core out of cotton too. Same grain size, same distribution. So it was a beautiful control sample. And what it tells me, because this was June of 1985, and now what is it, August of 2004, that description has been working for longer now than 19 years. Only 19 years previous to when this was discovered, was back in Sweden. You couldn't have carved this from this. We also took a look at another mineral in the stone, and that is mica. And that's important to kind of mica. We focused on one mica that was biocide. And what I wanted to do was try to determine how long did it take for the mica, for the biocide, to weather away on the inscription. I knew it took a lot longer than the pirate. To be honest, the answer at the time I came out with this idea was I didn't know how long. So they gave us an idea to study the weather in the tombstone. They gave us the right there, compare them, and see how long it takes for biocide to go away. We had to go to Colorado, and Jim and I went out there together, and we had a very memorable trip that we recall in the publication in New York. The base on the tombstone was the microdegradation on the KRS was longer than 200 years to develop, based on the level of the tombstone. And when I saw this picture right here with all the micros, it went down on a fresh piece of the KRS, and it weathers to this, which is on the flip side. There's no way it will hold until live 200 years, I'll tell you that much. So for these geologically, it's very simple. That it is impossible, okay? And I presented these findings at the Midwest Plains Conference in 2000, in Everett 2000, and you have to understand something about my business. You know, We get called to testify to this all the time in different courses about concrete blocks and smell. And I always get the final word because I have the scientific factual evidence to back it up. And I have not lost the case yet. So when I present these results and people say, you don't care about that, it's okay, so we'll go in cars and I'll look at that. Well, it bothers me sometimes. And because of that, and I just like send those people to question me because it's actually good enemy. And I said, okay, I want to find out what the heck is going on here. And it comes to the next one. And of course, I'm this is got to myself a little bit. This is at the end of the conference, we presented those results to the people that were there. We recognized the man, John Polanski, myself, my wife Karen, Alice Kego, who's an anthropologist, archaeologist, Nielsen, Barry Hansen, and Ken Henderson. And anyway, that was the conference in 2000. And after that, it was come to do this, to do some more work. And of course, I was corresponding with kids the whole time. And I'm like, kids, what's going on here? And you know what he said to me? Welcome to Kensington, Runestone. People question everything. Well, we sit here, and of course, we had spent time here in the past and knew a lot about things. But there were many documents that we thought we hadn't seen yet, or maybe we find some new stuff. So we started digging from Darwin and St. Paul, 8 minutes from the Historical Society, which is more convenient for me to get down to Texas. So we went over there and we started to find something. And some of you have heard the document first presentation. I'm not going to give that. I'm going to talk about a few things that actually tie in with the older documents that surfaced here in the last couple months, which will be unveiled out of the hallway of the cemetery. But they tie in with some of the things that we found during the documents. I mentioned Professor Winchell, a geologist. He's a state geologist. 1877 and 1900. I learned about this guy in college. He walked on water in my world. There's a top geologist #1 in history of Minnesota, probably in the United States. This guy. His reputation is spotless. Okay? You can find plenty of holes with me, but not with this guy. And when I found out that he had studied the Runestone, Dick told me that, well, what about Winchell? I said, Winchell? What about Winchell? He studied stone. I actually got a little nervous. I thought, oh my God. What he did from 1909 to 1910, he made 3 trips to the Kensington area, and he interviewed all some family members, 70 people in this room. He talked to Ohman a number of times. He talked to his neighbors, his friends, members of the family, to try to get down and get to the core of all the ruins that were circulated by that time, which was 12 years after the stone was found. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but the bottom line is this. He concluded that the said stone is not a mock forgery. It must be accepted as a genuine record and exploration in Minnesota as a date stated in the description. And when I read that, first I used the fact that he agreed with me. I guess I really shouldn't have been surprised because he used the proper methods to reach his results, and so he saw that the weathering was very good. The other thing that he had the advantage of was he spoke with them and his name. And he was convinced that this guy was honest. Okay? Next slide. There's another research that is looking at the question of the Kensington Runestone. One of them is the former dean of the grad school at the University of Minnesota, and a well-respected historian in Minnesota history. He's called Minnesota history. Guess what? He wrote a book called Kensington Runestone, New Life on the Old Village, published in 1968. He's very persuasive. He's a very, obviously a very intelligent man. And people I've talked to, and he's talked to. He's a nice man. Went through his entire file, personal file, his research file for his compilation of his book. And he was a diligent researcher. He spent many years doing his work. And he did some good work. And he also did some poor work. He came to the conclusion that the stone was a hole. This is right out of this page. I think it's 123. And this is what he said. What matters is the sum total of historical, runological, and archaeological evidence. The runological and historical side is, in my judgment, conclusive. The description of documents that Winchell made these 3 trips into Kensington. He took 50 pages of handwritten notes about the conversations and geological investigations and topographic work. 50 pages. Very detailed. He was a geologist, but he was a geologist too. And I will say this, I'll compliment Mr. Blair. That notebook was lost for like 50 years. He found it. He was in Minnesota. And what he did was he transcribed the entire contents of that notebook in his book. I give him credit for that. But I have a question for him. Why did he do it when he formulated his conclusions? And all I can say is that he says nothing in the book about Winchell's geology, which was obviously in contrast with his final opinion. So I have some real problems with his work. We'll talk about it. One example in detail, but I want to get Dick to talk here about Runestone.
Johannes Runestone visited Kensington Museum in Alexandria in the 1949-50 time period. And he wrote this important name from 1950 and later published in the Smithsonian Miscellaneous Studies in 1953. He was considered to be the #1 archaeologist in Scandinavia. He was the head of the English Museum in Copenhagen. His credentials were impeccable. Legend refers to these reports in the appendix. It says nothing about it whatsoever in these books. Now, in Denmark, private files are sealed for 50 years. They are now been open for Professor Ronstedt. There is no question from the private correspondence that he was extremely disappointed with the Smithsonian institution not to push his decision forward that against the Runestone statement. Plain has no excuse to ignore Ronstedt. He doesn't quote any other archaeologist. So here's sort of, real question. How thorough is this investigation? Then you see, according to his note as well, there's no indication that the professor made any attempt to mention his own family. Did he? No. How on earth can you talk about history at the Runestone when there were members of the family present during the investigation? They never tried to contact. Likewise, numerology, based on the discovery of history and solution, showed that the ruins on the Kensington Runestone did exist. Therefore, all of the knowledge of the opinion of the Kensington Runestone was a forgery, based on the fact that there were 6 rooms never seen in Scandinavia, is now null and void. So, all of his basis of his opinion has disappeared. Rather than speak to the Ohman, he relied on written testimony from people like the postmaster in Ohman, who recalled the conversation he said 60 years earlier in Ohman, who didn't live in Ohman. At Ohman, that he had said, I would like to figure out something that would bother the brain of the learner. Well, Ohman may have said that. I can't imagine why can't he remember Ohman, unless it was somewhat unconscious after Ohman got famous. But this doesn't prove that he was done. So that's the kind of evidence that Blake was using to craft his final opinion that Ohman, Andrew Harrison, and Gwen Polterlad were involved in the hoax.
But you talk about a couple of the old stories that I know you all know. I call myths about the Runestone. And that's one of the things that I found so interesting about them. The things I heard initially, once we got into the documents and really started to dig and talk to people, we found out that the truth was the opposite of what everybody thought. Was the filthiness of the doorstep? Well, that's a famous one. And as a geologist, that was important to me. Because I knew that people would say, well, what, did you take into account the 10-year However, I needed to be able to address that. So I wanted to try to find out what that really true. Well, according to Winchell's notebook, this is what he wrote for community with Ohman. He said it was brought back when some years in the shed. At Ohman, then Mr. Ohman took it up. Okay?
That's something that really stood in the shed.
There is actually some question as to whether this building is the shed that actually contains the, or the room from inside it. A good example of now, think of Rockdale Extension and the public buildings, you know, it is the fact, and as far as we know, it is a fact, but that site was on the workable. And this is an example. Right now, we do not have official shed for this building, but okay.
That's one way to take out a lot of it. I know it does. It doesn't matter. It's still a long road. Whatever. The point is that it is not outside, getting wet, and exposed to a wet and dry cycle. And that's important for what we're trying to figure out. Next slide. But the new quote, the public evidence of all the guys at the bottom of that question, came during an interview in December 29, 1949, with Edward Ohman. Remember, Edward Ohman was the one who was with his father, over the day the stone was discovered, and noticed the inscription first. So technically, this is the guy that really found the Runestone, okay? And here's what he said in this interview with Bertrand Richards of the Minnesota Historical Society, 1949, ironically about 6 months before he died. Here I sat down on and started to visit the Bureau of Finance's distribution of duties, and I suggested to Dad that we should take it home and use it for a doorstep. To me, this is the origin of the rumor right there. And he said, we should take it home then. Edward, no, not right then. The story goes that it was used for a doorstep, but it never was. That's Edward. He lived there, he didn't know. And I'm sorry, but any other testimony to me, Paul takes a back to his first-hand testimony. And what's important about this is some second-hand information, or Edward said this, or Edward said that. It's recorded, and if you want to listen to it, you can. That tape is here. So if you want to listen to it, it's an amazing tape. And you tell me yourself when you listen to that tape if you think that guy's credible. You don't recall rooms. Well, that's another thing that Winchell tracked down and got to the bottom of, okay? The person, well, it says right here. And it was funny because I found this very fresh letter, a letter that Wolter wrote. I haven't found the original yet. Probably gone. But this was basically inside a linguist who Winchell feels homeless. Okay? This is not in the Kensington file. I don't know why this is. It's important. It should be there. A lot of articles we found are not in the Kensington file. But if you go back to Winchell, today I received a letter from Northern Minnesota, which in part clears up the reported room scratches which I had been said to have made at Gunner Johnson when I built this house. I do not remember that I wrote any room there or anywhere else. And as the Gunner thing, I knew Old North, and as a meanwhile, I never learned that language. He's really old. He says, I don't remember doing that. Okay? Well, this museum will become important in a little while. Gunner Johnson was the guy. And he tracked this rumor down, and he was on these 50 things. He was mentioned. Was all on the stone. That's the fabulous question. I've heard that said over and over. And I found it was interesting because what we knew at the time, he was an house he was a carpenter. He had that confirmed over and over again. But in an article that was written by the South Tribune, I saw this sentence right here. Ohman, stone cutters in Ohman. And I called the person that wrote the article and I said, well, she did that. And they said, well, because I've been at Wolter, published in the Smithsonian, that was at the Science Museum at the time, with the Vikings exhibition that was traveling across the country. And it was room part of the expedition. And in here, here's the reference that they reference. Oh, it's only report to help. And okay, well, the reporters off the hook. But it's still nonsense. Okay, where did this come from? Well, this was written by the Wallace in chapter 29 of the book with the expedition. Well, let's keep going. Remember we talked about how when they transcribed Winchell's notebook? Well, Winchell tracked down that number too. And in Winchell's notes, that is transcribed in the way the book, it says here on page 156. And Ohman has not been known to be stonemason. He was a carpenter. Now, what's amazing is that in that article I just showed you before, where the reporter got the reference, I got the information, in that book there's a reference. The reference is like this book. This is what the Vita Wallace means, it's a reference. So how did you get back to it? I mean, this is what happened. I mean, you can see it yourself. I'm not making it up. Okay? But you know what? With all due respect to Professor Whitehead, I want to read it myself. So I go to the page in Winchell's notebook, the actual notebook, I found it there. And it says right over there, Ohman has not been known to be a stonemason, he was a carpenter. Okay, so there it is. Well, if he was a stonemason, wasn't he? Well, for you to still at it, December of last year, originally not a farmer, but a stonemason in construction worker. So we want to call her and fill her in. This is what's been going on. Amanda Ohman. How many people know about Amanda Ohman? Not many. Well, I didn't know about her until not too long ago. And I want to tell you a story here, a verse from the document. It's a very sad story, and I'm just going to tell it because it's very important. It actually ties in with one of the documents that was found here in the last month and a half. This is Amanda in about 1915. And I have to tell you, the people from my life, where I said she's a beautiful gal. Anyway, she's all like wonderful. Joanne has this picture. She brought it up time ago. Show the whole thing. Go on how it is. Over top of it, over it. Who was the teacher that after the investigation in 1910 was asked to review a book that belonged to Ohman. This book right here is the Officer's Book of Swedish Grammar, what we call it, the No, but the one thing that they do in 1910, and that we found in the Historical Society. That book is here. Newton Marshall during his investigation asked Mr. Ohman, said, it really would be great if I could take this book and have it for researchers to look at. So, it's important. Can I have it? He didn't want to give it to him, but eventually he relented. He did do it to the society. Now remember that because one of the documents that we're going to show you is directly related to this book right here. But in a moment, was actually do that book to see if maybe there was some connection between the Runestone and Ohman's ability to carve the Runestone. And he wrote a report essentially that you can't even come close to carving the Runestone in this book that was in Ohman's possession at the time. Okay? But he later on became obsessed with this stone. And that's the only word I can use to describe it. And I'm probably being nice. He's nuts with Billy, in my opinion. And this is the stress of one of the articles that he followed when he went out to the farm doing his research in October of 1949. And apparently the only person that was home that day was Amanda Ohman. And he sat there and he said, "Hey, I'm doing this research. Your father was a brilliant man. I admire him. And I'm doing to try to set the record straight and clear the open name. And I would like to be able to borrow a couple of these articles. One was the scrapbook right here. The other one was the Rosanna book. Another one. Another book that we have, which is basically an encyclopedia about swimming. And inside here, there were a couple of pages that had some primitive rules in it. Once again, you couldn't see it anywhere carving the Runestone with this rule in the Rosanna book. But he took it that day. He didn't want the bottom. He just did it back. Oh, go ahead.
year ago, I was just a historical society, and that's the oldest file. Several that belongs to the owners, actually. We've never been able to locate it since. One of my tours next week will be to see if I can retrace my steps when I read. And it's full of all the articles that we cut out. And so it's a mystery for the moment. Apparently it was never returned. No, it was never returned at all.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. Yeah. I can tell you a few things about Conrad. He's a good professor, a music teacher out there at Harvard, and Tom Porter, and he had that step by the handful for the Montgomery Ward School, or about that step. They never dropped a few, because all the professors were buying the stuff there at Montgomery Ward. And he came down here down the lake with a student, and he smashed the Runestone. And he took the plate camera and smashed it all to pieces. And I had done a case for him, and it's a gay family that lives on the farm, and the boy telling him about just the whole history of men and smashed that Runestone. He said, I'm going to get rid of all these damn faces. And I said, really? No, please, yes. Well, Barry, I would think if anybody can straw that might know something about that, it would be you. That's very interesting. Well, I tell you what, I didn't know the guy, I never met him. I was going through his personal file. I spent about 2 weeks thinking about it. So, one thing of letters, one of the files of letters about this case, and all of this is correspondence between he and Eric Wolter and Eric Walton, all of other producers. And all I can say is these guys sent letters amongst between them, and it was a conspiracy to put the phone down. And we got some of them introduced in this manuscript, and all you can do is yourself. You tell me these people respect it. My God, they're not too. I'm not kidding you. Next one. I don't go off on that. This is real country. This is the rules that live in there. And again, we're not going to go along and ruin the production here, but you can't do it. Okay, well, let's move on. What's really neat is that there's a series of letters that Holmes wrote to a man after he visited the farm. And these are copies. And you go on one sheet, and the blue copy is the copy of those letters that he wrote. Now, why he kept this, I don't know. If I had done this, I wouldn't have kept this. He wrote this one in October. I got that wrong. This is actually October, not November. It was about 3 days, 4 days after he was at the farm. And he wrote this letter. And after all these articles, he wrote a letter that said, I'm supposed to check for $5 which you can cash and keep the book. In other words, he's trying to negotiate with his book while he's got it in his hand. Here's $5, I'll keep the book. Alright? Next letter. Well, that's a class action. A couple weeks later, he's already received a letter from Amanda. She's already written back. Okay, within 2 days. And he wrote another letter. He said, Amanda, my checks are key. I invited you to keep the book. In other words, he said, the heck with you now, I want it back. Okay? And I can only imagine what was going on in her mind. She's going, uh-oh. Next time. Oh, he wrote another letter. 2 days after that. Please remember what I said when I talked to you that Saturday, October 8th. I'm working for you in the old name. That's how it's working out. Now imagine, she's sitting here, I don't know, she's about 56 years old. She's lived her whole life under the father of this Runestone, thinking of her father. And we're talking about the family. And it was no fun. In fact, it was probably a living hell at times. And this guy comes along and starts singing this song, and all of a sudden he says, here's $5, I'll keep your book. She must have been going, oh my gosh, what did I do? She probably thought, you just can't make a clear damn home. Hello. Thank you. A little over a week after this article comes out in the Minneapolis Tribune, new evidence proves Runestone fake. The evidence, he said, was in his home that he got from the Ohman family. Thanks. A week after that previous letter was written a week after this. I'm working for you in the Ohman name. But he the rest of those letters, but there's no thing in it. You can read them. This guy lied all this. Oh, I got here's the article of defense in the next letter. Well, I didn't get a chance to do it. On. And it went on for about a year and a half. They hired an attorney. And they did this thing, you know, you'd like to take the book back, but that's, you know, and they, how would you write something like that? Next time. Edward got involved. Okay? He knows the whole. And I tell you what, there isn't much documentation getting over Edward thing, but the stuff I read, something in there, a nice guy. They just basically looked, they had it long enough. He sent it back. He wrote 3 letters. Never done it. And the whole thing goes back every time. Yeah, about it's just saying, it's just nonsense. And I think it's interesting to note that Edward died about this time. During this period where they started getting thrown back. That's about the time he found the stone, about Kensington. And this is the obituary thing. And, you know, I guess I don't want to go too far out of respect for the Ohman, but the one thing that I wondered about is, you know, what was going on with the man and that beautiful woman and what happened to her that eventually anybody. Lived in her and taking her own life about a year and a half after that event. And there were a lot of things that happened. Her mother died, her husband died, she didn't have any children. Dr. Edward passed away, and I'm not saying it was because of the season of holy, but I probably think that had something to do with it. And it's a sad story, but remember this story because what was found in the only document, something pretty other on, you see it in the Well, what we're talking about today is the honesty of old Rome, because that's really the crux of the question. Next slide. Really asked us a question. Darwin and Tom, we did the interview a couple of months ago. We called the Ohman interview, and after today, it's been mailed. Anybody who wants to listen to it, I think you'll find it very informative. One of the interesting things that's on the page is we finally get to hear what the Ohman have to say. Everybody's always talking to everybody else. They're going their own conclusions. When they're going to really stop to get down in an honest way and find out what they think. Okay? And that's honest. But Russ Strickland asked the question. When we were in that interview, and I was there, I really wasn't prepared for it. But I went back and I found the answer. But the question was, is it ever been documented that Wolter actually said, I did not carve the Runestone? Well, to my knowledge, nobody ever interviewed him, but it was never recorded. However, and we have to thank Professor George C. Blum, one of the most staunch critics of the inscription itself. He made it mention again. He came up with conclusions. He visited the Ohman family, and he sat down and talked to them. And he said a lot of things. He wrote a report that made it mention again. And I found a copy of that report in Winchell's file. And Winchell reviewed that. And again, I'm not going to talk about what Winchell said. It's really amazing. But one of the things we found in there is this statement by Ohman, documented by a critic. Okay? And he said, to me, he disclaimed, quote, the ability to make such a mistake. In other words, I couldn't do anything about honesty. But Wolter also denied having made the mistake. He volunteered denial of that, evidently thinking that I knew that the suspicion was directed against him, and his denial was very emphatic. Okay? So he said in his document, I didn't do it. So, well down to this. He's either a liar. Okay? It's because he didn't do it. If he's a whole, he's a liar. Period. In the story. Or, he's telling the truth. And the reason I say that is because it's well documented that the story of the thing was completely the truth about a 30-year-old natural truth. I don't think anybody can believe a thoughtful explanation of how he
Northwestern, University of Wisconsin, and a number of other universities in the Midwest. Now, what's interesting here, this is put the proof to me that Ohman, on its own face, is not following the system. Because there's a number of mistakes on these copies, namely the absence of double dots, which they were the experts and he were not able to find because of his ability. These double dots were not discovered until often, in certain cases, 10 years later. Some of these double dots were discovered by we only a year or two ago. So as hard as it composed in the system in the first place, we would have put double dots in my opinion, because you could see where they were. They were actually when you were unfamiliar with what was in there. I mean, this is the first picture investigated, even into this century.
You get the copyright with it. This is very interesting before, and this is in the documents. I'll try to make this quick. Another geologist, an art geologist, and librarian, Warren Ohman, who was the secretary of the museum committee and wrote all the records and all the documents that were held in the Historical Society Museum Committee, for many years, especially during that period when they investigated the Runestone from 1908 to 1911. And actually what they were doing was the society was considering the possibility of purchasing the stone for $5,000 in Ohman, a stone that he didn't own. But he offered it to him. And so during this investigation, there were geological investigations done by Winchell, who went out in many years, what we talked about, and there was also linguistic experts that their opinions including Professor Swan, who was very emphatic in his opinion that it was a hoax. And so what happened is Professor Winter, Professor Ohman, who admires greatly Professor Wolter. And the reason we know this is because in the documents I'm going to show you in a second, he not only writes the history of the museum committee, but he also writes his personal letters in it. And he wrote to his sister and his brother. And it's interesting because it's in those letters where he kind of lets down his guard and talks about his feelings and about different things. One of them was how he felt about the Runestone. In 1911, this is what he wrote. Next one. He was 50-50. Oh, before we do that, these are the letter principles. These are these documents I was talking about. Back during the 1908 1917, which are the documents that I looked at, these are the 11 principles in the NHS archive. And basically, there's books about 2 inches thick, which are all right pieces. And then what he did was he would pick up these papers, he would write his letters, that he would read through, he would record on the right paper and read. And so we have a carbon copy right here. This is an example of one to Ohman, and you can see that some of these are in pretty bad shape. Some of them are literally falling apart. But I went through every one of these from 1907 and 1917. There's 1,000 pages every year. Okay? And I just came up quickly that I wasn't so sure I didn't read every letter. I read a lot of them. And after a while, I started to know what it was that was going into the Runestone. Okay. In December of 1910, he said, I'm 50-50 on the Runestone. Winchell has full confidence that I'm 50-50. And he talked later about the reasons why it was the language in Houston. And eventually, in May of 1911, there was a vote about whether they were going to purchase the stone. And the museum committee said that it had to be unanimous. Otherwise, they weren't going to spend the taxpayers' money to purchase the stone. Upland voted against it. And you have to understand something. Up until this time, he never met Ohman. Winchell was the one that met Ohman. Okay? Winchell died in 1914. Okay? And what happened was, I kept going through the letter press book after 1911, because after that vote, they gave the stone back to Ohman. But I kept reading because Upham, the geologist, who did some pretty pioneering work in glacial cultural geology, started about were convinced that it was a whole. Recently, I had my first opportunity to visit Kensington and to talk to Mr. Ohman and his family. As a result, I feel confident that he is honest, not a partner or participant in any fraud. Hence, I'm strongly convinced that I believe that Professor Winchell and our museum committee are right in accepting Runestone as a true record. And then he tried to restart an effort to buy the stone again, which died. You know why? Because when Winchell died, a fellow by the name of Golden One took his place on the museum committee. Guess where he went to school? University of Illinois, the same school as George Ohman. They knew each other. And Ohman and him all figured it out, the other mindset grade, and the effort died. And the only thing I'll say on this, which is kind of an ironic twist in history, is that they were with Judge Winchell. They asked him to come down and meet the committee back in December of 1909. And Ohman wrote back and said, hey, I don't have time, I don't have money, you don't need me anyway, here's the story of the discovery and sort it out. Well, Winchell had gotten only to come down to St. Paul, and he would have met all these people. Remember the committee? That stone was in St. Paul. That's what it is. Anyway, excellent. Now I want to do is tell you a little bit, that's the documents, and I told you those stories for you because they're tying in with the new stuff. But we want to I want to tell you a little bit about what's happened in the last 9 months, I guess, maybe better year. And it started with the Runestone Museum making, I think, the wise decision to send the stone over to Stockholm, to the Historia Museum, to display it there for 2 months. 3 months. And that was the poster that they made, and we went over there and we participated in the conference. So Dick and I spoke. We spoke about the language, I spoke about the geology. There were other experts there. There was about 700 people that attended that conference that first night. And it was amazing, let me tell you, it was fantastic. But we didn't have the screen there, Stockholm down here. And towards the end of that one, there was a request was made from the Helping Museum. It was supposed to come up there for a couple of weeks before it came back to the United States. And you have to understand something, that when we were over there, the reception of the Runestone and the garden that created this movie was amazing. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. There were about 120 articles in television programs. Oh, we got that. That's how many articles that have been published and stories on television. I mean, it was big news. And when we did our presentation, members of the Ohman family in presentation, and afterwards they came up and said, hi, I'm Rita Blanks, and I'm from Porta, and we're relatives, and I was like, oh, cool, this is fantastic. And they heard about it in the media. Well, the Helping Museum asked if the stone could come up there for a couple of weeks before it came back, and we made another wise decision to have the stone travel up there. Now, the Hoodie Hall, this is Helping is up there, it's like a stage, okay? Kind of the North Central Street, and the city we went to was Hoodie Hall, that's where the museum is located. And on this photo, scroll out first in that map, see that is there's Hoodie Hall right here. There's the one right there, there's Hoodie Hall. And this is Portia Darwin Parish right here. There's Portsmouth. That's where Ohman immigrated from. It's 5 miles away from the museum. Okay? So in February, we went back. Now, this is just get a little ahead of myself. This is the big Darwin Museum, which is outside. The beautiful museum up there. It's absolutely fantastic. We also took the tours on Runestone, it was great. And when we went up there and Scotland, who's not here today, but another Ohman, they came along. And he met with relatives, here they are. And they took us on a bus tour, and we saw where old lived, where his grandparents lived, his parents lived, all the families. It was just fantastic. And when we came back from that bus trip, there were 2 members of the Swedish media there, and they asked everybody to get there and take a picture. And these were some really good folks, and you guys are all Darwin. You guys had a chance to meet them someday. You won't believe it. They have some really important information that people need to know about this street to Ohman. One of the things that the relatives show us was, have you seen this in our encyclopedia about the Kensington Runestone? This is the entry into their encyclopedia. In the last sentence, this is essentially what it translates to in English. It ended first in 1976 when it was known that the founder of the Ohman, right before his death, confessed that he had been threatened to carve the description of his Job. The deathbed confession, everybody knows about that, right? Our friend Wolter, okay? If there's anybody in the room here that's friends of Wolter, not to be very kind to him, because quite frankly, this is worthless. And I'll tell you why in a second. The grand history. Now, this was the final nail in the coffin, right? You know who these two guys are? This is Walter's family. This is our Ohman. They were pals. They were good friends. And this clown here, okay, and I'm being nice to him. I'd like to call him something else. What kind of a guy was an old man who was threatening all his life with the Ohman family? He's going to go and interview the Minnesota Historical Society and say the garbage that he said, because that's what it is. Okay? And I can say it because we know now. Okay? And I'm not going to take you through the whole story, but it just makes me angry. The first time I listened to the grand case, and I read those transcripts, was 3 years ago. And I listened to the tape, and I was like, I'm not going to find this nonsense. And the reason the final blow got me fired up was the encyclopedia. It gave you this right. This pathological things I talked about ends up in the encyclopedia. And it's amazing. So, add it up. And call that up. Darwin Ohman. Because I figured, I'll talk to something in the area that you walk in, and I heard some things. But I thought, I'll bet you know him. You know him. He did. And we talked about it, and also Tom talked about it. And they said essentially the same thing everybody else said, that he was alive.
How about if you go back to when he was born and when the Runestone was carved?
Hey,
And how old was he then?
I'll get there, Gary. Hold on, hold on. Hey, look, I'm getting a little walked out, and I probably shouldn't, but it was not my mistake. And we broke down that testimony, Darwin and I spent 8 hours, okay? And I was wondering, because I wanted to ask questions of something that actually knew them, okay? But when we did this, we found some interesting things. Wow. Walter had some problems with his storytelling, with his testimony. Now, whether you realize it or not, this is serious business. When you sit down and you record this, okay? What I'm saying right now is serious business, okay? Being recorded with 3 or 4 cameras. You guys are hearing it. So I'm choosing my words carefully. But this guy, was doing total nonsense. Here's the problem, guys. It was 6 times. His testimony was in conflict with the known facts, okay? In other words, he's lying. Okay? He said he saw the Runestone use the doorstep. So I think that's what you're getting at. How old was he then? Well, what did Eric say? What did Lincoln say? He reduced it to the doorstep. Now, what Walter does, this is his technique. He takes all the stories that we all know about the Runestone, and he weaves either himself or his father into every one of these stories. I mean, they were there for everything that happened. You know what? Jonathan, he said his father. He said, well, I guess that said it only caused Runestone. You know, before the stone was found. Well, wrong, Walter. It was Governor Johnson. Remember? Winslow cut that down. He's lying. He does it 6 times throughout the testimony. He's not credible. Okay?
So, Doc, mention also that Winslow investigated all
I was just getting it. And you did get it. There are a lot of things that, according to Walter, there was also anything that ever happened with his son, all of them. But in the 50 pages of Winslow report, you know how many times the grand name is mentioned, either Walter or his father? 0. Not one. Now, either Walter didn't mention that ran somehow a word was being detected, and Winslow was the silly investigator, or he's full. Okay? He's full. in this interview. And clearly out today on my side, the rest that concession is done. Okay? It's done. Our money. Thank you for having credibility to go out. And he's expecting me to say anything. Darwin, go ahead. Yes, it is. As a matter of fact. Here it's available for anybody. Good point. That's a good point. It is entertaining. So I read the answer, and I actually called back on the phone. I was laughing. He was laughing. So, anyway, it was a real good experience to go through that. So, we can laugh about it now, but, again, on a serious note, you don't sit there and crack somebody's reputation. You really understand that you're in a position to do that. And we're in a position to do that. But it's important because, what kind of a guy is going to do this to a guy who is like one friend? How do you think our thought about this? Well, you heard what this guy did. You'll see pictures of him. You'll see the letter that we found that was written by Wolter. And what kind of a guy is this? Now, we're going back here. Mary, what? What is your hospital? On Walter Brown. Well, what do you say? Well, first of all, he's a liar. Because he was born, about 10 Runestone cars. Little before, but he had about 54 years. And when he turned the Runestone, that means Runestone. Okay, big lie, he couldn't do it at 4 years old. And he's a pretty strong guy. I don't know. And he goes over to and steals the Wolter, and he's very winter time in the Bobsleigh. Steals the Runestone tracks and makes up the elevator himself and starts to the drainage song. He goes up the elevator and they're raising 7 sacks for the drainage with his name on it. Walter Brown says on his shoulder. This is what kind of a guy we got. Okay, well, I guess we will cooperate what we were told to do. I think he did it once. So I excited about the letters because I took this picture on the back of one of the tour buses when Rita Wednesday up and said, "God, see that guy in the back of the bus there?" And I said, "Yeah, well, he's got a bunch of letters written by old woman." Wow, so we went back there and these letters. And I can tell you because I know all the things that really well. There's a bunch of things that you know all letters. And there's one here from Sharon. She wrote that. This letter amazed me. We read on the box, we had one of our guys that sat down and read the letter. It started reading in English. And it was a letter written by Sharon a month after Old died about his death. And that was in the exhibition. It was a beautiful letter, really, in its own way. Of the 47 letters that the relatives in Sweden had, and no one was seen before, no researcher has ever seen them before. You know how much fun that was to see them for the first time? That was so cool. I couldn't read them, I told anyone there, but it's about recently. And there's 2 letters where he talks about the stone. Out of the 47. And both of them, he's talking about the big rally in Saloon Point on June 1st, 1927. The first letter was in May, about 2 weeks before the big party. And basically he's telling his relatives that it looks like the archaeologists in the Linwood are in agreement that the stone is real. And Ohman and all these people got the big rally going, and it was a huge deal. But he writes about it there. He writes about it with a smile. Because I waited 29 years for this, to finally get to the bottom of it. Okay? And let me tell you something. We're clearly advocates for the stone, we're clearly advocates for the Ohman. But they've earned it, okay? If I would have found a smoking gun and left it letters, I would have been really sad to do it. But I would have brought it forward. And if I do find something, I will, and it'll be really. It's not going to happen. But if you do, we'll tell you. But it's going to be, and when I look at this letter, it increases the credibility to me. The second letter, this picture is the same picture, but it's taken at Saloon Point. Help me understand. One of these guys is who? There's Yeah. So, next question. That's, John Eckman? John Eckman, that's right, okay. Robert Watson. And this is all. And this is a big day. This is a heck of a big day because the second letter is about after the big event. And the overflow in the fourth his letter, this is all he wrote about that. And he basically says that Kensington, Runestone, it was a big day. There were 10,000 people, 3,000 automobiles. It was a record for the city. And he's proud of it. He said, hey, we had a great party here. And that's what I said. They talk about that and all this other stuff. But again, to me, I don't know how long you can do it. It's the same guy who was happy about an event we waited a long time for. I think those letters are important. In May 26th, I went back to Kensington, and Darwin showed up a couple days later. And we had an amazing trip, let me tell you. You might want to, well, we'll talk about the Washington meeting, just one more slide. But the purpose for coming back there, we invited back by Kristen Berg, who is the director of the Historical Museum. And we wanted to have a debate. And he asked me to come back, and I said, sure, it's available, I'm there. And so we went back, and we had a debate. The guy that I debated with was this guy right here, Mr. Scholl, who, I'm not even sure if he's a linguist, they call him a linguist, he's the guy who discovered the largest English, which everybody read about in England, okay, which were originally the first drawing that they felt that because there was the room roll in there that was so similar to the Kensington stone, that there had to be the secret room roll that all over and something that they used to carve the room stone, okay, that was one interpretation. We'll talk about that instead. Next slide. I'm going to just talk about the Washington movement.
At the moment, there's only two people identified in police who knew about this movement. Edward Martin and his older brother. They wrote down, the older brother wrote down in 1883, and the younger brother copied it in 1885. And we definitely indicate that they copied it from obviously an earlier document. Their ages were, they were not out of their teens. So that in itself is a mystery. Who else in Sweden knew this? Is the question. However, the discovery of the large window established a couple of important points. Number one, the plane that Ohman had invented the runes and take the runestone now fall away. Because the runes that runologists say do not exist in Scandinavia, now exist in Scandinavia. So obviously, Ohman didn't invent it. But the issue now is, did he copy it? Did he know somebody did it? So that's another tiny question. Very difficult to solve. Of course, also quite important is that all the foundations of the Scandinavian runologists claim that the Kensington runestone is a hoax. It's based on the fact, and only on the fact, that the six runes have never been seen in Scandinavia. It's only dangerous to make a claim to the inhabitants of the evidence. Usually, such a claim is not accepted in court, but apparently in the court of public opinion, these kinds of claims have had some weight. Because the argument against the runestone has always been, hey, these runes never been seen in Scandinavia, and the farmer must have copied or invented it. Now, this addresses the issue, Curtis has almost known the runes because he hadn't been copied down before he left in Sweden. Now, he left in 79. These gentlemen copied in 83 and 85. However, Ohman did go back to Sweden in the year 83, they left in 85. The chances of doing these people were slim. However, when the Kensington was discovered in way into the police. So we're always excited because at least a third of the police people knew nothing about the cleanup. And you can see now how the tide has turned completely on the evaluation of Kensington. Now, just look at the original result. I could spend considerable time on that, but I will not. However, the issue is there's some evidence here that this is evil, and not just the 100 years, say from 1700s to the 1800s. Maybe it doesn't matter, because no matter what happens, Runestone was extremely shocking. However, there is some evidence, and I'll blow on one of them. This room here, you see that? That is the W room. Now, in my earlier papers, I pointed out a very interesting fact about documents in medieval times. For some odd reason, they were using the letter W, D, or excuse me, UC to represent W. He didn't see why the W developed and D used together. But it's also interesting that this is a new room, and that's a new room. So the makeup of that particular room is based on the way they were writing in medieval times. Not very modern medieval times, but in the period 1400 to the 1400s. So there's a clue that room has to be developed in that way. There's many other indications that it's still on the study location. But I'll say it again, the tide is set at the
After we had that debate, which was great, I kind of gone down a little bit, and they came back and argued, but it was a lot of fun. It was done in very respectfully. Chris is a delightful guy. I really enjoyed it. I thought he was quite himself. And we had a beautiful dinner afterwards. I'm going to tell you a quick story about what happened before the dinner, but I think it's important to get to what happened that night. It was absolutely amazing, in my opinion. Next slide. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ohman to come up with you for a second. And this is really your story now. Come on up. Come on, Darwin. Anyway, after dinner, before somebody left me in that night, and Henry crossed and ran away on the way out of the day. And he introduced himself and said, "Certainly, he said, no," he said, "Everyone said your grandfather didn't do it." So he didn't do it. So later I talked to him a little bit about that dinner. He and I were talking, and he was asking me some questions, and he was interested, about other people in the area and everything like that. But anyway, a lot of my and I think I'm thinking myself, should I be inappropriate or how could I do it? Yeah. And I said, no, I said, you only do it. You think Ohman did it. And he said, no, he didn't do it. And then we're also the same thing a few minutes later. And actually at dinner, Henry can do this, geology, well, we got some emails to that effect. And he sent it to me that I have in my back pocket, and I'll pull it out when I need to. But he's under some painful pressure over his country. A lot of people don't want this thing to become known. And there's a reason for that, and I'll just tell you what happened to me. After we did the debate, we had the debate. I'm sending up my PowerPoint like I do when I give you talks, and people are talking, and blah, blah, blah. And these guys say, well, thanks for waiting, by the way. To walk about 6 blocks to have dinner in the restaurant. Well, I was right behind, and when I walked out of the museum, there were a couple of young men waiting. And I recognized him from the crowd. One of the guys had said that when he was pacing like a steamboat. He was like rooting for me. Hey, hey. And they stopped me and said, "It's Wolter, we're talking to you." And I said, "Sure, guys, I'm walking, I'm waiting." And they said, "Oh, that's fine." And they said, "We think it's really good that you came here, and we really appreciate that. And we really just wanted to say that, keep up the good work." And I said, "Well, thanks, guys." And they started to tell me that there's a controversy going on in Scandinavia about historical scholarship. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, the scholars have lied to us. And what he said was that it had nothing to do with the culture. It had to do with the old interpretations of history in Scandinavia, as opposed to some of the new ideas that people are coming up with, new archaeological evidence, new scientific evidence, and new interpretations of the old evidence. And he said the scholars are resistant. They don't want to talk about that. This is the history, and that's the way it's going to stay. And the young people and some of the new people are being rejected. And it's a big problem. And they just said, "Hey, keep up the good work." And I just went, "No, that's very good." And I said, "Don't worry, I'll do it." So then we went to dinner. And then the next day, which was my last day in Sweden, Christy Bird invited me to lunch. And we sat down, and just to give you an idea of who this guy is, how many people remember the story of the Star Tribune about that controversial exhibit at the Historical Museum in Stockholm, where a Palestinian artist, a young woman, put food coloring, red dye in the fountain outside, and then put these little wooden boats with a map, pictures of the children's suicide bombers in the Middle East, and it made worldwide news. He's the guy that chose to make that decision, and he called Rob Blackboard. And we talked about it. And I said, "You know what?" I said, "You got a lot of courage." I used to do that. I said, "You got, that's real courage to do that." And I said, "You obviously got a lot of swag." And he goes, "Well," he said, different directors, different people have different ideas about how what their role is in their society and culture. He said, "I think we're here to challenge people with those things." And I think that's wonderful. And at that point, I told him the story about what happened the night before. And I said, "I know why you brought me over here." And he laughed and kind of smiled. And he said, "Why?" He said, "You brought me over here because the Runestone pot, and this is a classic example of a problem in scholarship that represents the bigger picture, the bigger controversy that's going on. You brought me here to serve the pot, didn't you?" And he kind of laughed and said, "Yes." And I thought that very interesting, because it really is a beautiful example. And that's what the Kensington Runestone is. It's a problem, a method, and it's a people problem. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I just found it very, I don't know, timely and appropriate when that whole thing came about at the very end, and suddenly realized why we were invited back for the third time. So, next slide. I'll let you go again to George.
Sorry about the word picture. Of course, that's a really fun, Henry and I looking at it.
Sweden on my second trip. I made 2 trips to Uppsala and Nielsen. Henry also has a mobile at Jerusalem, similar one here. And what we decided to do after moving in California, land was there as well, about 2 years ago in February. We studied the stone seriously, not the lineage, but the language. And those 6 words, unknown 100 years ago, while I'm getting research. And so we embarked on that investigation to determine this. And of course, in the process, we also evaluated the dialect on the stone. The dialect in Kensington is an English dialect. Now, it's pretty simple to find if the usual suspects have any dialect or not from their home region where they came from in Sweden. It's quite difficult sometimes to find where they came from. For example, according to the various letters we find that the Ohman refers to where Anderson came from, the dialect. The only evidence I ever had where Andrew Anderson came from, the dialect. Here's Stockholm about. So we have the dialect is up in this area. Helping land is in this area. And neither one of them have any dialect. The letters that they wrote also illustrate they wrote with the A dialect. The A dialect would come in a word like finish guy. Spelled with an A. The E dialect would be less pronounced and it would be spelled with an E. They're typical of one of the Norwegian dialects. The Flatten come from Ken in Telemark here in Norway, and they do not have any dialect either. Then Opal transferred to Industrial Wisdom, and he comes from a parish that is in this area here that also has no dialect. So suddenly we're faced with the fact that the 4 unusual suspects have, though Flatten was never a suspect, so I don't understand how he voted in, because he was adjacent to the farm where it was discovered, and he had certainly access to the spot. But it turns out that their own dialect showed that they were not capable of writing the dialect. Could they have faced it? Well, scholars were unaware of the dialect until the last century. So all the papers started to be written about them in 1910 and 20. So no one could have replicated the dialect as found in a number of other words. Go to the next slide, please. Oh, well, yeah, okay. We got one more to go.
Well, here we go. Evidence of Ohman, and this is a summary of the things that we think are important. We want you to know that people don't know about. First thing, the Minnesota Historical Society documents that we found absolutely support his honesty. And there are others, and I thought the ones with Ohman was the most compelling. The Ohman letters to Sweden about the Kensington Runestone, so we took credibility. It had nothing to do, at least as far as I can tell, with any kind of nonsense going on. And I also find it interesting that in none of those letters did he ever once write about any of the negative stuff that was going on. To me, I interpret that as he just didn't want to bother his family with his trouble. I don't know. Someone has a different interpretation. The large piece is true that the invented ruins that Ohman allegedly invented existed, and he used to be there. I forget he had nothing to do with it. The testimonials by 2 witnesses, Chris Shaw and Henry Williams. Henry Williams, the number 1 chairman in Ireland, said he didn't do it, and they had their own investigation and their theology. We know what we know. It's called the Bible. If your work is sound.
I mentioned the 6 words. I'll leave one you to remember, because it's also an English word as well as an old Swedish word. That was the problem. You have the word from on the stone. It was immediately identified as an English that proved that it was forgery, because it was not an old Swedish or totally lost. Now the 2 of the froms on the stone in Sweden linguistic expert section that would not be found in all three. When I traveled my first trip to Kenneth Williams this last time, he said, when you get here, I have a small surprise for you. That I said, fine, this is our favorite restaurant, and which we did, and he gave me a paper written in German, which I really did, but it was from 1880, and there was an outline in there, a document sheet, is what that is, an outline. On the dialect of the medieval, and most medieval times in the islands off of Stone, the islands off of Stone, where the Kensington for many centuries. And in that dialect, they did not use the word scroll or from, they used the word from. So there all the time, from is an old Swedish word. There's nobody but Henry Williams, me, and Ohman too. Dick, you're worried the ending there. Next one. The Ohman interview, Tom Colbert, Darwin, Russ Ridley, who by the way was the one who conducted the Grand Interview, who it was his idea after he had been up here and gave a couple of presentations to the Historical Society and Runestone Museum. He got back and he stopped to get a couple of visitors and he said, you know what? You think that Darwin only was letting me interview him? I thought, that's a hell of an idea. And so we did it. And in that interview, I think that the Ohman, as well as the conflict in his testimony, reduced his credibility about the deathbed confession. So you can put that with the back once and for all. And the recently discovered old family documents indicate that the family believed in Runestone and in Wolter. And we're just going to briefly summarize what we are. I'll go through it quick, and then we're going to unveil them and you take a look at them. They're really cool. By the way, the inscription, the leather, that geology I started with, after we get all done with this stuff, the geology also proves his innocence. There wasn't anybody alive on the planet at that time that could have carved this stone. So, here you go. The only document, and I have to just tell you briefly how this came about and what my interpretation is of how this came, why it took so long for me to come forward. All of the parents had 9 children, and won't go through all of them, but one of them, their 6th child, was Ida, the second daughter. And Ida had moved to Fargo and had a son by the name of Rollo. Well, it wasn't until relatively recently that I didn't know who Rollo was. How many people knew who Rollo was? Besides you, Ida. Not too many, okay? Well, when Rollo was 3, he was put on a train, sent back to the farm, and was raised by Jeremy Kohler. And Ida went away and never came back. So while we was at the farm, he was like one of the Ohman, the Prince Ohman, okay? And I now know that that place is very special to him. That was where he grew up. And obviously, probably was tough, not ever knowing his mother and father, but he definitely had a special connection with the farm. And of course, he was young enough, lived there for a long time. And as time went by, eventually Art came into the home, and it was Rollo who got all the stuff that was in the Ohman house. It belonged to Karen Nolan, and the particularly moving forward. So he got it in 7, and still has that stuff. And what's interesting is that if anybody said father to even ask them, if they were even given at the time, and who was behind them, after all, Darwin statements for all these years, they just didn't answer it. We know the truth, we're not going to talk to anybody about it, just go away. But even if they did, they would have known about Robert and probably would have found the documents anyway. And it wasn't until June that I met you guys. I met you again in the community, but I met you in June. And we just met and talked over here at the bar and had a beer, and then when we went,
in the dark, I'll show you something. So I went down there, and by the way, the Ohman yard system came by the Alliance and American Wolter and the rest of them all there, and this is an Ohman reunion family party. And I'm the one outside of it. So I'm sitting there, and I'm, hey, how you doing? How's your business with the relatives? Remember, I've been to football twice now, and I stay at your house. I know all these people. And then Darwin comes by, and he's just sitting in my face. He goes, "What's this guy? You want like this?" And I look at it, and I recognize it immediately. You know, you want to say that. And then I look at the table, these two people, and I see stuff, letters, and photographs, and documents, and books, and it's like, I put the beer down. I actually put the beer down. I was more interested in this stuff than the beer. And he started going through it. The next letter that comes out, I recognize the handwriting. It's Keller Ohman, two Ohman. Written in Norwegian, unfortunately, but I'm like, we're not going to get to this guy. So I didn't have that. He's 5 years full of stuff. My God, you talk about finding your posted treasure with a pot of gold. That's the pot of gold for me. And I couldn't believe it. So we start going through these stuff. Well, eventually that night it was just a celebration, but then we settled down and we spent 3 nights, about 5 to 6 hours each, the three of us, 4 of us all together. On June 30th, July 20th, and about 2 weeks ago. And we went through everything. And I'll tell you, that was really something. I mean, it was fun, it was exhilarating, it was fast, a lot of stuff was fast. We found a picture of your grandfather, some of you guys have never seen before. And what it to me was a problem with it. Anyway, I love you. Anyway, so, okay, I'll cover it. At one point, that first night, Joanne wrote, she went through the boxes, and it was her stuff, right? And she's pulling stuff out, and love it was pretty good. She found some great stuff. And then she goes at one point after a couple hours, she goes, well, I don't think there's anything more to share, and what's going to go? Well, with all due respect, we're not done until I say so. And we all like, oh, well, anyway, Tom, you're holding another book that belongs to Ohman. There's Ohman. There's a second book in the Ohman collection from Ohman. Now, the one that everybody pays attention to is the Ohman book. And I'm not going to say anything about this book yet because we haven't really looked at it yet. All I know is that you open it, and this is the moment you open it. He said, you just see your thing here, and you do it. I'll be able to do it in this class. So, there are all kinds of photographs, and hundreds of photographs. And let me tell you, some of the photographs are important, because people like Wolter and talk about the blacksmith shop, which is way out in the woods. Well, the pictures of the barn, and that blacksmith shop, the one that you standing in front of us back in the 70s. Now, really. It was relative to the house. Now, I don't think that's way off the place, but it's evidence, okay? And a lot of people family pictures, you never thought about it like that before, but it's actually some of it is evidence. And of course, family pictures of the house, this is all woman over here, there's Amanda, there's Ida, and this is your dad. Well, you're woman right there. Next slide. There are legal documents, all kinds of legal documents, private to the family, but I did want to show this one. I thought it was kind of ironic. Our home had stock in the Front Union Publishing Company. Probably still owns a piece of the Epic Press. Does anybody care? You're going to book, okay? And then, family documents. This is the, that's the document for Amanda home. And we got a bunch of things to get that thing, protected. That's a beautiful document there. Neat stuff for the family and stuff. For book collecting, we're 48 books. And we spent one whole night going through those. Tom pulled them out. He was going first and give it to Darwin. He did the second review. Joanne would write down what it was, the book title, the author, the year it was published.
That says a lot before we go off here. It says, confirmed on the original main note.
So you get one side of it, okay? And one thing that is important to know, that both side of it, infrastructure, the old that was given to Ohman after he found the stone by Anderson. So he could learn about the inscriptions. And I'll tell you what, that explanation is more true now to me than ever, because I'll tell you what, this was one smart guy, Ohman, I'm telling you. And we just started with reading the book. But, I mean, what a library. This guy was a thinker, he was smart. And if somebody wants to concoct a whole series, you gotta have somebody smart. And I was smart guy here, but I was somewhere else. Anyway, next guy. But look, he's several other books. He wrote notes in his own hand. In Swedish, mostly. Almost exclusively. This is the Village in the Modern Concept, published 1868, I believe. And he wrote notes. And the day that this book was prior to when they built the house on the farm, I think what we're going to find out is that these are notes he wrote in preparation for building the house. Really easy. And we're having those translated over in Sweden right now. Well, I can't tell you what he's going to say yet, but we love it. And he signed it. He had a beautiful signature. I know it's hard to read. And that's what it was 1586. It really wanted to. Or it's not. So he wrote it when he was back and forth. And that's what else was saying when he found that. There's something written there. I don't know what it says.
He returned, he went to in 83 and 4 and 5. What was the date?
That's what he said. He must have been back.
To the back of it.
But he wrote it. That's his handwriting. That's definitely his handwriting.
Well, that maybe was there later.
We'll have to look at that. Next slide. Look at it. Picture around the newspaper articles. There was a whole bunch of newspaper articles that the family kept. What was very interesting is the series of articles that were published in the Minneapolis Tribune in April of 1955 about the Runestone. They had it for 7 days. And during that time, in the paper, a woman was prompted to write a letter to Amanda Ohman. And you're going to see it out there. Read that letter. It's a beautiful letter. The ironic twist is that letter was written to her 4 years after she died. But the boy skeptics, Art and John, that they would have been the ones together. But read that. Another thing that you can read, turns out read is evidence. Okay? Here's a newspaper article that was in 1949. It's an obituary for W.L. Darwin. Okay? And he wrote here, before he came to South Dakota, he only operated a threshing machine. It seems as though a threshing machine held some sort of historic significance to him, as it was in the fall of 1898, while he was threshing for his neighbor Ohman, that all found the Kensington Runestone. Recently, the authenticity of this stone was questioned, but it was Darwin's mind that he didn't know now from what it was real, as he helped remove the scale, etc., from the target. Some of these tools I talked about, this is a stacking wall. This is a completely independent source. It says, I know. Now, it's an account, but it needs to corroborate the ritual. It's important. And Art Circle is usually the one that probably was on that. The letters, the personal letters to me are the best. And I told you a little bit about that letter that we did to Amanda in 1955. You can read it yourself. It's a beautiful letter and stuff. But I tell you what, this one to me is the most important letter of all. It was written by old Jews. And 1957, April, he died about 6 months later. Okay? And that's important too. He's writing to Art and John, his brother. He writes, "Dear Brother, Suppo." And he just talks about the same things that things that happened of an article about the Runestone that was written in the Echo Press. That's what prompted this letter. Then he talks about the personal stuff, about Wolter and some other things. But on page 2, he writes about the Runestone, and you'll see it. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, you can read it there. what the big time was? Okay? He remembers that. It never happened. Things that don't hold. And it's only the big and the stone going down standing. But it's just anything about that. I hope they do it probably maybe in our lifetime. And then it says, I can probably tell you when I remember about the discovery, and he starts to write down details. He decided to be true. And he includes steps. Now let me ask you something. If there was anything funny going on in that family, with old homes, don't you think that 10 children somewhere along the line would know something? Or they would be suspicious if there was something going on? This is kind of correspondence. This is brother to brother. They never ever dreamed that this thing would be in public like it is right now. And if there was anything funny, we would have something in here like, they're still talking about that Runestone. This is sincerity. People believe it. And it's just follow this it's important for a guy to go to the next slide and actually draw steps. This is a brand new step. It's beautiful. Look at it. There's the tree, there's the ground, there's the roof, there's the zone. You can write the dimensions. And what he wrote here is, this is the shape of the roof as close as I can remember. Why would we waste time trying to document this information if there was a hole? Remember, he was the oldest son. He was 12 years old when he was son. And I guarantee you, this man was out there when he found out about that stone. His younger brother, probably, how long was he there? His line was more developed than that review we had. I got a whole video, I know what I'm talking about. But this is weeks of credibility. And take a look at it. It's amazing. Thanks for holding on to it all this long. Next one. I look at this and I just have to ask you a question. Here I am. You look like a liar to me. Would a guy like this play a whole family, his wife, and allow her to take a picture like that? They believe in me. What he said was the truth. So, I guess the last thing I would say is, can you please put this element into that now? And we can worry about the authenticity and figure that out later. Let's just oversee it. You guys okay with that? Okay, I'm done. That's it. What time is that? We had so much fun when we runners and Darwin. And we think, like the 3 nights, we pick them up, we look at them, and got them scanned on the scanners. But today we went through the book to do something with this time, and we pick them out of the box and look at them and small. You get the Conrad, he had it to me, and I looked at it and said, God, wow, whatever. You went to the log area, then Scott was here. So that's how that guy got. It was a long time. I don't know if it's pretty true. Yeah, it's so long. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming, everyone. Enjoy it. Yeah. We do have all the things to take, unveil this exhibit that we've been working on the past week or so, or 10 weeks, or whatever it's been. I want to thank you guys for bringing the photos out, bringing the letters out. And I also want everybody to understand that these still belong to the Ohman family. We put copyright marks on all the letters and photos on all of them. They're yours, but we understand that probably sometimes you may want to publish them. So we're going to respect that. We're not going to take any photos out in that area. We don't want to be public until you make that decision.
and people coming in and be talking about Morningstone. There's something in the public papers about some of them. So they'll be on board next week at 2 o'clock. I think it's going to be a good meeting. Now, the people that are unveiled, Mr. Kohler and Joanne, if you would step on the hallway and do your thing, we appreciate it. We do have one, go ahead. We do have a lot, one, 4 o'clock, something around it. That's available, easiest way is to get into to get to the dining room, which is through the hall. That was the path, that was the case of meal. The exhibit is also open, or will be open, if somebody that corresponds to that. Again, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you again.